as I mentioned, not every Democrat is behind Joe Biden, and some would even go so far as to say that those who aren't really supporting him, rather just protecting him. But again, that protection is arguably opposed to the protection of our democracy, right? Well, one of those Democrats is Marianne Williamson, who's looking to replace Joe Biden as the Democratic nominee for president. She joins us now. Thank you so much for coming back on. I want to get your reaction to everything you just heard from Ben.
Well, Ben gave a very reasonable argument, but the part of the brain that reasonably, rationally analyzes an issue is not the same part of the brain that decides who to vote for. People are not going to reasonably decide that Joe Biden's record is this or that when they themselves are skipping meals in order to pay their rent, or selling blood plasma in order to pay their rent, or unable to leave the basement of their parents' house because even though they went to college, they're so saddled with college loan debts that they have no hope of ever even owning their own house. The American people are suffering. You have the vast majority, not the vast majority, but over 60% of Americans who are living to paycheck to paycheck. 70% of Americans are living with what they call chronic economic anxiety. So what the Democrats have to be talking about now is not the record of the last 4 years in some reasonable way. What the Democrats have to talk about is what we're going to do for you over the next 4 years. And to be honest, I wasn't hearing Joe Biden talking about that even before this. So the Democrats are in trouble, and the Democrats need to face that they're in trouble. And yes, it's hypocritical, and yes, it's cowardly that all these people who will say behind the scenes, if nothing else, if you're going to support him in public, then don't leak to Washington insiders that you know are going to be printing your idea that they know he's going to lose. Why would people vote for this party? This is really terrible what they're doing.
And I want to show you something. So Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she threw her support behind President Biden yesterday. Let me show you this.
I have spoken with him extensively. He made clear then, and he has made clear since, that he is in this race. The matter is closed. He had reiterated that this morning. He has reiterated that to the public. Joe Biden is our nominee. He is not leaving this race. He is in this race, and I support him.
Would it be fair to say that that is frustrating for you to see that? Because you not only have a Democrat, but an extreme left-leaning Democrat who has been critical of President Biden, basically saying there's no other options, this is it, the matter's closed. Is that frustrating for you to see that?
It's very disappointing. I assume if you're thinking about running in 2032 or in 2036, then you, like all these other people, are thinking about their own political ambitions. They're admitting behind the scenes that they figure that the president is going to lose, but they're thinking about whether they can run in 28, 32, 36. Meanwhile, the people of the United States can't, maybe these people, including Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, can take another 4 years of Donald Trump as much as she rails against the idea. But millions of people cannot. We're talking about Project 2025 here. We're talking about a man who believes that climate change is a hoax. We're talking about a man who said to his former defense secretary, Mark Esper, who said this on 60 Minutes, that at one point, when they were talking about some what they considered rowdy protesters, the former president actually said, couldn't you shoot them or something? Couldn't you just shoot them in the leg? This is a man who proudly, he bragged about the fact that he appointed Supreme Court justices who overturned Roe v. Wade. So this is just making a hypocrite of all of these so-called progressive, particularly Congress people, such as the one you just mentioned, when they say how much they care about these progressive issues and are willing to go along with a president who they know he's not, there's a high probability he's not going to win in November.
So that's my next point. What do you think it would take for President Biden to step away? Would it be donors? Would it be other people in the party? And how would it be that someone like you would be able to step in at this point? Walk us through that.
Okay, there are two questions. The first one is, what would it take? We know what it would take. It would take Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and whatever other very highly placed Democratic leaders to go into the White House, to have a meeting with the president, his wife, Hunter Biden, whomever, and say it's over. You are risking this victory. We cannot afford to win this victory. And not only is he risking losing the White House, he's risking losing the House and losing the Senate. So there is an intervention that could be staged. And they're dithering, oh, there's just nothing we can do. I mean, if the president doesn't want to give up the delegates, there's nothing we can do.
And real quick, before we run out of time, how would you be able to jump in?
Okay, first of all, look what France just did. 4 months is a long time. Look what Great Britain just did. The people who are now saying, oh, it would be so chaotic, what they're really saying is it would not be under our control. They chose Joe Biden, and I'm the one who would know. They chose Joe Biden, and they want to make sure that if it would be someone else, it would be someone they chose. They know that if they open it up to a mini primary at this point, oh, the people might decide. Can't have that.
I tell you what, we are living in kind of unprecedented times, so we shall wait and see. But Marianne Williamson, thanks so much for coming on the program. Appreciate it.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.